Hello. Okay, I can hear sound, but let me unmute them. Your default microphone has changed to headset. Okay, otherwise I will just stop using it now. Okay, where do I unmute my participants? Okay, let me unmute them. Ask. You can now send non-verbal feedback. Come on. Good morning, comrades. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, we
comrade.
can hear you.
Yes, comrade. We can hear you.
All
We can
right.
hear you.
Okay.
We
No,
can hear you.
thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome to the 47th anniversary commemoration of our martyr, our comrade, our leader, Comrade Onkgopotse Abram Tiro. This is a significant significant date in the calendar of our movement because Comrade Tiro, as we all know, was probably the second high-ranking leader of our movement to be assassinated by the apartheid regime. This is coming almost 2 years after Comrade Mthuli Shezi was murdered in a very gruesome manner. In a very gruesome manner at Jamestown Station when he was pushed in front of a moving train. So this date, yeah, Comrade Tiro is important to observe by members of the movement, adherents, and those who support his ideas and his ideals. I am particularly pleased that we are joined by one of the Tiro family members, Comrade Gaongalelwe Tiro. I hope you can hear us. Why don't you say hello to the participants here, Comrade? I mention him in particular because he's done a great service to the legacy of his uncle and his relation, because 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, he published a full biography on Tiro, his family life, his personality, his background, and all of that. So I would urge most of us who are logging in here, who really want to have a glimpse into who Tiro the man was, to get hold of that book, Parcel of Dead. Dumela Ntate Gaongalelwe.
Dumela. Hello to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, ra leboga. We go leboga rona. Hopefully, as we roll out this month, we might probably call on you also to share your insights and ideas about who your uncle and the man who bears the same family name as you was, because you probably have much more deeper insights than those of us who just know of him as an icon and somebody who contributed to the struggle. The way we are going to unfold this program, it has basically got two parts. We had hoped to start early in the morning or at this time, with the wreath laying in the Nogana. Our comrades are there on the ground, but it looks like they are struggling with the network. I have been in communication with them about 30 minutes before we kicked off, but they are pulling all stops on the ground to make sure that we at least get some feed. They said they will let me know as soon as they've been able to work out the technicalities around that. As we know, Dinokana is a rural area. When we designed the program, we're hopeful that it's not as bad as we think it is. But as they say, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. So to their surprise, when they got there, they realized that the network is a bit too weak, and then it keeps cutting. But there was a comrade who was going to try and organize either a Wi-Fi or a fiber to connect and to give us feed. But be that as it may, it does not deter us to affirm that Tiro was one of our great martyrs. He contributed a lot to the building of resistance in this country at a time when our people had basically lost all hope that the apartheid regime was going to be defeated. As we know, at that time, Tiro, Biko, Mapetla Mohapi, Shezi, the Miezas came onto the scene when hope was receding in the struggle. Most of the other political leaders were in prison and aging. Others were in exile, and they were aging as well. But Tiro came onto the scene with that 1972 remarkable speech that he did, which presented wave after wave of mass resistance. So when we talk about the history of mass resistance in this country, we cannot talk about it without referencing, perhaps as a starting point, that 1972 speech by Tiro, which, as we know, led to his expulsion from the University of the North then. And because the students saw him as a victim of apartheid persecution after he was expelled, a number of the students refused to attend classes at the university. And it was not only limited to the University of the North, but other colleges of education, technical colleges, and other universities in this country then said, well, if Tiro is not going to come back to university, we are also not going to attend our classes. Those of us who grew up at that time who are young know that our uncles, our aunts, neighbors, and community members who were at technical colleges or theological colleges and all types of higher education institutions came back home, and they spent a great deal of time saying that, well, there are class boycotts at the universities. And it is because of that history that many of their generation and our generation as well took a stance never to graduate at universities, particularly under apartheid. So Tiro influenced the spirit of resistance in this country a great deal. Subsequent to 1972, we also saw workers rising up. We link the confidence to resist and to take a stance against apartheid and confront that brutal regime at that time, by linking this with the workers as well. In 1973, the Durban worker strike happened, and it was for the first time that workers had risen en masse in South Africa, particularly Black workers. And that strike by workers in Durban in 1973 actually led to major changes in labor law, in granting Black workers their rights and all of that. So all of this confidence to resist is traceable to the events of 1972 at Teflop. And of course, then it led to the high point of June 1976, when the students in Soweto started that resistance against Afrikaans, which flared up and spread to all corners of the country. And it was that resistance, that movement, that led to throngs and multitudes of young people fleeing to exile and giving confidence once again to the movements in exile, bringing young blood into the movement, particularly in their combat forces. So to a large extent, we owe our freedom, our liberation to the work that Tiro did, to the confidence that he built in young people and among Black people and among workers to resist apartheid. So it is appropriate that despite the challenges of COVID, despite this being a working day, and those of you who have joined in, have done the honorable thing of, respecting and observing this important day by remembering that somebody once laid their lives so that we should be free. The president will, after the wreath laying in Dinokana, we're then going to proceed to the second part where the president was going to deliver a memorial message in honor of Tiro. We had scheduled the program to start around 12 o'clock, but because we are now being disorganized by the live feed from Dinokana, just hold on a second, comrade. Let me just sort out something on my timeline. Okay, yep. If we don't get the live feed from Dinokana, we will then have to ask the president to come earlier than scheduled. But let's see how the program unfolds for the time being. Whilst we are waiting for the comrades at Dinokana to resolve their technicalities, I wonder if I can use my discretion, seeing that you are here, Comrade Gaongalelwe, perhaps just to afford you a brief opportunity, even if it's about 5 to 10 minutes, to give us tidbits of your research and the narrative that you compiled about Tiro, perhaps things that we might not know as people who are not so intimately involved with his life, but who really relate to him from a political perspective. Maybe to share with us what is contained there in your book, just to interest comrades and other people who may be interested. I hope I'm not pouncing on you, but I'm just trying to, use up some time so that we can give these comrades an opportunity to give us a live feed on the at the wreath laying. If we don't get there, then I will then have to ask the president to come in earlier than scheduled. Do you mind, my brother, my comrade? Gaongalelwe? Comrades, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Comrades, can I get some feedback? I'm worried that I'm not.
Yeah, we hear you, comrade.
Okay. Please
We can hear you, comrade.
give me some response, because sometimes when you are all muted and I just ramble on all by myself, I get the impression that I might be talking, but I might not be, going on live, and you might not be hearing me. So, Nade Tiro, that's my request humbly to you. If you don't mind, perhaps we can give you this platform just to share with us your insights about the life of our martyr and hero. Okay, I'm not okay. Should I unmute you, or what? Are you muted? Out of honor, right?
Hello,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, the line is actually quite
Is it my line? or yours?
But in times I'm unable to hear you. But I think if I heard you, basically you were just asking me to give like an overview of what the book entails.
Yes.
Well, basically what I've attempted to do with the book basically was to sort of narrate a cradle to grave kind of narrative about the life and times of the late Onkgopotse Tiro. And at the beginning of the book and how I went about it, I started by looking at the community that he came from, the community of Dinokana and that area in general.
Okay.
Precisely because I wanted to try and understand him, in totality, to understand what would have been, for instance, his formative influences. And I go quite, I do, I did quite a extensive research into that part of the narrative, because I think to a very large extent, what would have made him susceptible, to the then germinating philosophy of Black consciousness would have been, the community and the backgrounds that it came from. As naturally you would know, Dinokana and its surrounds,
Yes.
has quite an extensive history of involvement in the liberation struggle.
Yeah.
And I think to a very large extent that would be what would have primed him for in later activism in life. But obviously also the philosophy of Black consciousness was quite an important influence that shaped his political outlook.
Yeah.
If you look at him, when he arrived at Teflo, he would have been fully exposed, to the total reality of, the life of Black people in the country. But Black consciousness introduced him or provided him with a framework,
Yes.
to understand, the total reality of the oppression of Black people in the country. I think I also looked at the kind of personality that we have been, because I wanted to look at Onkgopotse.
Can we ask comrades to mute? We've got a speaker on the podium.
Oh, okay. No.
All right. No, you go on. You go on, Gaongalelwe. Go on, Comrade Gaongalelwe. Did I mute you? Oh, sorry. Okay. What do I do now? Just hold a sec for me. Ask to unmute. Hold on a sec. Okay, but you are unmuted. Are you there, Gaongalelwe?
Yes, I am.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, go on. Let me just okay. Go on. Well, it's just that some participants have got their audio on, so I'll mute them. It's fine. Go on.
Hello?
Yes, Ngale, go on. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, you can hear me. All
yes,
right.
Yes.
Yeah, no. So basically, yes, like I was saying that, one of the things also that I wanted to do with the book was to look at him in totality, Onkgopotse Tiro, the person.
Okay.
Not just Onkgopotse Tiro, the activist, and to do that, I spent quite a lot of time in Zerast in Dunogana, speaking to people that would have grown up with, and people that he would have interacted with in one capacity or the other, just to get their recollections and reflections
Yes.
on the kind of personality that he was.
Yes.
But then the rest of the book speaks to the historical background as well, from the formation of SASO in 1968,
Okay.
all the way up to the seminal speech that he delivered in 1972.
Yeah.
At the University of the North, and I tried to kind of like assess what would have been its impact, because I think the import of actually what happened with the Tiro affair is actually lost on a whole lot of people. Because I think if you look at it, it was part of an integrated continuum that basically culminated in what subsequently happened, say in June 1976.
Okay. Yeah.
But then beyond that, another aspect that I looked at was around the issue of what could have possibly happened, with regards to his assassination. Who would have been responsible? And that was one area that was actually particularly tricky, because I approached the authorities in South Africa at the time that I was writing the book, to try and get his security file declassified, and they basically gave us a runaround. The same thing happened with the authorities of Botswana, who would have been particularly useful, because that's where the investigation into his death basically happened. Well, in time, and that was after the book was already out. We eventually found. The security file was eventually declassified. Unfortunately, as you know, most of the records have been destroyed. It was actually quite thin.
Okay.
It was in two parts. There was one part that was from the intelligence. I think that was a documentation that was deposited by Boss. There's nothing particularly explosive in what that part of the security file was saying, but I think nonetheless it was still quite useful information, because it corroborated some of the information that I'd come across. For instance, it speaks specifically to the issue of the banning order, that indeed there was a banning order that was on the way.
Okay.
You'd recall it was like 3 months just after the SASO 8 was banned, and I think they had intended there was also another cohort of BC SASO leaders that the securities had recommended that be banned, and Onkgopotse was amongst those, together with Ntate Mangena and several other comrades of theirs. And yeah, that is the security part. And then the other part of the file was actually from SAPS, from the police. It's actually even thinner than the one from the national intelligence. It basically also speaks about the issue of the banning order. And once again, it corroborates some of the information that I had not been able to corroborate. It speaks specifically about what they had planned with regard to banishing him. It indicates very clearly there that they had planned to banish him to outside Rustenburg, around the in Pilani's back, and they speak about, you know, like the accommodation that they had found where he was supposed to stay, you know, and the police station, and that he was supposed to report to on a daily basis. Obviously, he did not get that as he slipped into exile, you know, beforehand. But otherwise, you know, the rest of the book towards the end is basically general reflections in terms of, you know, what I would have thought, you know, his legacy represented and meant. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So it was quite an extensive network. Well, a police, security police dragnet around him, because what we gathered lately, or some comrades who were close to him, then informed that the Tswana Territorial Authority at that time in Bufutazwana was actually actively involved in also administering his banning order. And we are told one comrade who knew him actually caught a glimpse of that, and then they relayed the message. I don't know how far true it is. You know, obviously there are
Yes,
there's lots of
fact,
information
yes.
around this. Yeah.
I did speak to Ntate Khadiete, and which is what I say I found quite useful, in that, you know, it's kind of like corroborated what he had told me. You know, I in the book I did use quite a bit of stuff that I got from him. It's just that he was one of those that I spoke to towards the end, so I did not exhaust the material that you know he had given me from the interview. But basically what this does is that it actually corroborates his version of events. That would have been the document that I suppose you would have seen, because it also indicates clearly that they were interacting with Tswana Territorial Authority. In fact, Tswana Territorial Authority would have been the entity that identified a place to which, you know, they were going to banish him. So yeah, you know, I you know, it was quite interesting that his recollection is actually quite, you know, accurate, in that it's actually been corroborated by, you know, official records.
Okay. Well, without taking much of your time, because we just pounced on you because we had the benefit of your presence in this discussion. Yeah, we keep reading about Tiro and more information actually comes up. What I want to check with you is whether, you know, you explored his internationalism in the book, because Tiro strikes us as one of the BC leaders who was always conscious of the international dimensions of our struggle, in the way we are told he had visited Namibia with one of his friends. The name escapes me now, but the people in Namibia actually, one posted the other day and commented about the fact that, well, when a Namibian friend of Tiro was at turf, Tiro actually went with him all the way to Namibia. And when we commemorate Tiro, they feel that they also lost one of those who pledged solidarity with their struggle. And we are also informed that he visited Lesotho as president of SASEM, or perhaps before that, but it looks like in his capacity as president of SASEM, he interacted a lot with the old Botswana, Lesotho, and SPLS university students. I don't know if that comes through in your book. And also the fact that he established these links with the PLO, which was an underground movement. I don't know if you've been able to sort of explore that area, but I know that there's a lot just around the life of Tiro, and you know, you as one researcher and individual, you cannot cover all the ground, but maybe give us an inkling of what you know, if you have picked up anything from there. And whilst we are at that, let me also share this information with comrades and participants here and with yourself. There is the young man, I think you know him, Mujuta Mutlamme. He also is a historian and did I think his honors research on Tiro. So we've invited him to do a memorial lecture on Tiro, precisely to share also his, I mean, what he uncovered in his research about Tiro to complement what you have done. So on Wednesday, we will launch the Black History Month as part of our Azapo activities. And the Tiro Memorial Lecture will kick off that program. And Mojuda Mutlamme has been kind enough to agree to be the main speaker. And we've also invited Rekhadiete and Comrade Nosima Shoba to also paint a picture for us about Tiro as an activist, but as a human being, because they were very close to him, both here and home, and when he was growing up as a young man and into exile. So yeah, I don't know if you can maybe comment on his internationalism, as I say.
Okay. Yeah, I did look into that.
Okay, I think let's bear with him. It looks like the network is a bit unstable from his side.
Yeah, you know, I explored that and tried to get as much information as I could with regard to that specific incident. And there's actually one of the SWAPO people who also wrote a book, and he mentions that trip that
Okay.
you know he made to Namibia, and even goes on to indicate that from that trip they were invited, I think, to the SASO 1973. He invited them to the SASO 1973 conference.
Okay.
And, you know, he was saying part of, you know, the discussions that they had, in fact, was that he was particularly interested in learning about, you know, the worker strike that had actually happened in Namibia. I do speak about, you know, the work that they were doing under the auspices of SASM, and that, you know, around the time that he died, he was seized with the SASM project, and they were setting up a secretariat in Gaborone in Botswana. Okay. And he had traveled as well, you know, on SASM work to you know, so to, you know, and he used to go to Botswana quite frequently.
All right. Okay.
I had a look at his passport, which we have, you know, available, because he used to travel with a valid passport, and it shows several trips, some of which, you know, I could not establish what they were about. But yeah, the issue of, you know, trying to set up, you know, the armed struggle machinery for, you know, the Black consciousness movement, I do speak quite at length, you know, establishing those links, say, with the PLO.
Yes.
You know, Ndatemafuna, Professor Nengwekulu, and others were quite helpful in that regard. I speak to them about those issues here.
Okay, okay. Ngale, thank you very much. I think I mean, from your narration, clearly, we should expect a sequel from you, you know, from the records that were declassified. And I didn't quite get what you said, whether the Botswana authorities subsequently released the file. But you might
no,
not.
No. They've not cooperated. The only people who have subsequently released the files are the South African authorities. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Have you approached the CIA to check if they were involved, because they always have a hand in all of these assassinations in Africa? But that's a topic for another day.
I haven't, but in the book there's quite some material that I use that actually is from the US government, because in the what the WikiLeaks thing, there was some diplomatic cables that they declassified, and it shows the communication that you know, say your embassies in South Africa and in Botswana would have been transmitting through around that time.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay, no, quite interesting and insightful. And I think for comrades, there are many comrades here who know Tiro personally. So we hope that they will also, in their memoirs and reflections, also bring their side of the man. I think Comrade Khadiete tells some very interesting stories about his time with him at Barolong and how he walked him the last 400 meters or so from Teflop after he was expelled up to the train station or the bus station. So those human interest stories are quite useful, and I think we should expect more people to write and hopefully in future have a biopic on his life. Thank you very much. I think at this point perhaps we shouldn't.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Comrade Khale. We shouldn't use up much time. It doesn't look like we will get the live feed that we were hoping to get from the Dinukana side. Maybe we should ask the president at this moment to join in and do the honors of honoring and remembering Tiro and asking us to rededicate ourselves to his ideas, his work, and the ideals that he sacrificed his life for. Comrade President, are you okay?
Good day, Comrade Kepadisa. Let me also pass my regards and greet the comrades who have joined in the Zoom. And also to just pass my regards to the family of Onkgopotse Tiro, particularly Mangwane Tiro, who basically is based in Dinukana. And every time we want to pass there, do something there about Tiro, his house is open for us to eat, to sleep, and to do whatever it is we want to do. She's not well now as she was talking to you. She's in somewhere in Soweto, being treated or taken to the doctors. We went to see her last week, and she was struggling, but in a jovial mood. Also acknowledge and salute Comrade Gaongalelwe, is it? Yeah. For the efforts of bringing to the fore the history of Abram Tiro, the research which he has done, to extent which he has gone, to make sure that at least that aspect of our struggle and revolution does not go unnoticed, or it's not pushed under the table. When he mentions the other aspect, the question you asked him about Tiro's efforts to reach out to the others, the little bit that I know, because one has spent about 12 years in Botswana in exile, together with the leadership of the then Black Consciousness Movement of Tanzania, Comrade Moemedi Mangena, Comrade Khokong, Bokwe Mafuna, Ujebe Masukwane, Khadiete.
Are you there, President?
Yes, my town.
Okay.
Am I not audible?
No, I think you had gone mute for a few seconds, but go on.
No, I'm not. I don't touch. I didn't touch. I'm not muted at all. I didn't.
Okay, it could be the network.
Technology is failing us, but am I audible?
You are very audible, yes.
Thank you very much. So what I was saying is that we're staying not far from where he died and where he was buried. And we're able to pick up the history around some of his friends in Botswana, like Mogapi. A lot of people would have known Mogapi, who was a teacher in Botswana. And we managed or also spoke to people like Ulibile Gaborone. He's still out there in Tlokwe. At some stage, he was an MP in the Botswana government. Ulibile Gaborone was part and parcel of that contingent of SARS when he was mobilizing students around the neighboring universities of Lesotho, Swaziland, and of course, Botswana. But he also reached out to some of the young then students who were struggling in Zimbabwe. And they had interaction. If you speak to Professor or Dr. Ibo Mandaza, he does testify to the fact that they had some kind of interaction with Onkgopotse Tiro. And that was a build-up, an underground type of build-up to what's getting support from universities, especially in the continent, starting with Southern Africa and reaching out to universities further away from where we are, to say there's a struggle going on here and we need your support. And these names that I've mentioned are able to testify to that effect. The other point you mentioned, just to cover it, and pose a question to Gaongalelwe Tiro about what efforts were made to try to get those who are responsible for his death. And when we continue to have been in the leadership of Azapo, people like Comrade Mangena, Comrade Thokoane, and the leadership then, about 10, 15 years ago, maybe 10, efforts were made to reach out to the authorities, because someone had actually come out to say, I have evidence, I have information, I know who were responsible for the death of Tiro to some extent. And we reached out to the security police of the government, our government now, and posted the information to them. We have got the names of the people we approached and the people who were assigned to the assignment. We have the names. And it looks like it goes and goes and just fizzles in the air, just like a mist. But we also were given names of people who, from time to time, you also come across. They talk to you, they laugh with you, but their names keep on coming. And you can see, as soon as you mention this aspect, the hostility. And these things are not follow up. We hope at some point, one day, there'll be a closure on the matter. But let me come back to saying, ever since 1974, Tiro died or was killed. The Black Consciousness Movement and Azapo have never failed to commemorate this revolutionary. Year in, year out, come this day, the members of Azapo in particular, members of the Black Consciousness, will be wanting to gather around his grave Those who are far-flung, wherever they are, they'll come around to commemorate Abram Tiro. We did that even when we were out in exile in Botswana, in Lesotho, later on in Zimbabwe, other comrades who were in the US, UK, and all over the world. They would remember this revolutionary, this stalwart, who made so much sacrifice for the revolution of our country. At some point, we've tried to raise this with the guys who are sitting in government to say, are we forgetting Tiro? You know, the current president of the country, when he was at TEFLUOP, or when he joined TEFLUOP, Tiro had been there, he knows about Tiro, he knows about activities. And it's mind-boggling why the government is unmoved when it comes to struggle icons, martyrs and heroes who are not of the ruling party. Why should they be so cold to people who have fought and died for this country? So it is a matter that we must keep on. Hello?
Yeah, no, go on, President. I think it's our comrades from, Ghana. They've just come through, but go on. Mhm.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me also maybe bring them in and greet them for standing up when you ask them to go to lay a wreath at the graveyard.
Yes.
We do that personally, and a number of times in my various positions, and as president, I've just been there to lay a wreath at the graveyard where Tiro is sleeping. So it is something that we need to continue to do. We need keeping knocking the doors. But if they don't open those doors, I think it's important that this history must be shared. It is important that this history, young people should know about it. Not only that he died, but why he died. The sacrifices that he made for the sake of our struggle. And from what Gaongalelwe have said, and from those of us who have been part of this path of getting our country free of black consciousness, it's important that what we know should be shared out there, especially with young people. To mention that in 1972, Tiro was very instrumental in the activities of TEFLUOP. Then when it was very, very difficult and people are afraid to stand up, he was not one of those who could be afraid by giving the speech that he later gave. And subsequently been expelled, and a lot of hullabaloo was raised around him and the other universities. And finally getting a teaching post at Maurice Isaacson. He was lucky in the sense that when he could not get a job anywhere, the principal of Maurice Isaacson, Mathabata, and some of the members of the school board, like Reinkwe, were able to give him a teaching post to teach history at that high school. Now that was after I left Morris Isaacson, I was a student at Morris Isaacson earlier on in 1968, 69, 70, and a little bit in 71. And some of the players of June 16, I know them in person. I know Tsietsi Mashinini at the time when he was moving around with the name Don Mashinini. And because the young fellow felt he could become a small American who used to slang at the university. And you know, when young people at the time are assertive, we say, "Well, pop." But he was that type of a vibrant young man, this Don Mashinini. And the brother, Mukiti, who was Rox Mashinini, but also interacted with the university, high schools like Bonaledi, Orlando High, Musi High, Orlando West, Kanontwane, just around Soweto, and the other tertiary education. People like Seth Mazibuko, who is Sandile Mazibuko at the time, went with those names that were given to us by our parents. But how did Tiro get to Morris Isaacson and transform those young boys like Tsietsi Mashinini, transforms young boys like Comrade Iso Muketi, when he was their history teacher. And when they relate to you how Tiro was so good in teaching history, but at the same time, immediately thereafter, changing the subject to say, the history that I gave you, or that is in the books, is the history that makes you to pass your matric. But it is not the history that liberates you. Over and above that, let me give you the history that liberates you. And then he goes on to preach to young people about their oppression, to preach to young people about how those who have oppressed us mentally have made us into small boys. They call our fathers, whom we fear and respect, as boys, and our mothers as girls, who work for them, who wake up every day to go and work for these people. But not only to know the history and end up there, but to say there is something that you can do as young people to liberate yourself from these people. And ends up with what because terms, you can never be spectators in the game. You are expected to be playing. And that was preached to university students across the country. But with the era of Tiro after 1972, when a resolution was taken at Tefluo that we have been expelled to go home, but we are not going home. We are going to our young brothers and sisters in the high schools to explain to them what this course is all about, what this struggle at universities is all about, why we were expelled, why the speech. And those students, when they left Sterfloop, indeed, they did not go to their various homes. A lot of them went into high schools around. Comrade Khotso Mokhele speaks of Comrade Menzi Wambeu in the Free State, who came to their high school and explained and conscientized them and preached liberation to them. And that changed his attitude and the way of life. How these young people who were Donald Mashinini and Iso Mukherjee become Tsetlo Mukherjee, become Sietsi Mashinini. Instead of being Sidney Siathulo, he becomes Khotso Siathulo. Instead of becoming Seth, he becomes Sandile Mazbuk. I don't know what has happened. But a lot of us, including the president, who then was Cyril, and now changed to become Matamela. And now, of course, I don't know what has happened to go back to Cyril. But all I'm trying to explain and show, it's the impact that was made by Abram Tiro in the high schools and mobilizing students at Morris, students at Orlando High, students at Skanontwana, and of course students in other provinces, because Mokhediete will tell you how they were impacted by this philosophy, by this revolution, by this ideology, by this consciousness. How when we met with Bokabelo Bukala in Botswana, who came from Kimberley, how Stan Ntwasa linked this expulsion of the university at the north. What was made worse, or what made the students to be even more coming forward? It's his death, the manner of death that Steve spoke about. The manner of death that speaks, that Steve Bantubigo talks about. That this teacher who was exemplary, this teacher who was teaching us about liberation, this teacher who told us that there will be casualties in the struggle, has actually become such a casualty in 1974, on the 1st of February, when Tiro was killed with a parcel bomb. Things could never be the same in our country. And of course, it combines with what we talk about as the SASO Frelimo rally. Those students, those SASO members, those SASO activists who were arrested for their activities in Carisfontein in Durban for celebrating the Frelimo struggle, or the struggle in Mozambique, known as the Viva Frelimo Rally. The former president of Mozambique, when he came to address students recently in UNISA, he spoke about the support that they were getting, or they had the support of the Viva Frelimo Rally. They were under the impression that it came from the other organization, and we explained to say, no, it was actually the Black consciousness movement that was behind that. How the death of Tiro, how the Viva Frelimo Rally activists, how the SASO BPC9, how the Pufulsa students in the Eastern Cape, how the arrest of young people, how the trial of Nkuteu Musau was actually conscientizing young people. Some of us were conscientized by those activities. No wonder 1976 happened in the manner in which it happened. A lot of other people who want to shy away from it says it was sporadic. It wasn't sporadic, it was planned. It was anticipated. Something was brewing Tiro had laid the foundation. Remember, Tiro dies after they had killed Mthuli Kashezi in 1972. So it became very clear you're not going to be in this thing and come out scot-free. There has to be sacrifice that is made by those who want to raise their hand and say, I'm there. Of course, also the death of Mapetla Mohapi in detention. So 1976, the foundation for it, the preparation for it, is these trials, it's these deaths, it's these incarcerations, it's this harassment by young people. 1976 comes after the strikes at Terfluop, at Fort Hare, at Ungoye, and other universities. It doesn't come in the absence of anything in the vacuum. It comes as things were boiling. And the leadership of 1976, like Khoto Siahlolo Tsietsi Mashinini, Khotso Lengane, Thabo Ndabeni, Bongi Mkhabela, Jabu Mukhethi, can be linked directly with Tiro. These are the students who Tiro was teaching at Morris, but who also organized other students under the banner of South African student movements called SASM, that when they called these students, Tiro was going to talk to them. So he did not just talk directly to a Form 1 or Form 5A or B at Morris Isaacson. He speaks to the students across high schools. They come with SASM and he addresses them. They come with SASM from different other areas of the country when SASM organizes them and they speak these things underground. And 76 happens. So it is not something that deals with Afrikaans that is sporadic. Those students were not just talking Afrikaans. Afrikaans just became a fuse that is lit. But it is revolution, it is the freedom of the country. It could have been any other issue that was boiling at the time. And Afrikaans happens to be that boiling issue. And I know because I was a teacher at Musi High in 1974, and they were dealing with Boy Inspector De Beer, who wanted to force students to study in Afrikaans. And my students at Musi High, Bo Wayne Lufafa, said, not in our lifetime. And all can be taken back to Abram Tiro, his teachings, his revolutionary participation, and also his commemoration service at Regina Mundi. Regina Mundi is now known to many other people as a church that hosted struggle activities, commemoration service. But the first event of commemorating at Regina Mundi was the commemoration of Abram Tiro in 1974. And a lot of SASO members across the country who could not find their way to Botswana because they were refused with passports and it was very difficult. Only Comrade Thokoane was assigned to go there and represent the organization. We went to Regina Mundi, and some of us resolved when we were Regina Mundi that if this is a cause worth dying for, and there are other people or worth sacrificing, and there are other people who died for it, who are we? Why don't you join? And that's how we became very close to SASO. And when we went to university, in 1975 at Delfloop, could understand and joined the student organization. So I'm bringing all these facts to say Tiro was not just another leader in the Black consciousness movement. Tiro was not just another organizer of SASO, because a lot of the students became the organizers of SASO for as long as they were at university. As soon as they left university, they just forgot. Others became members when it was convenient for them. But as soon as they left, it was out. But for Tiro, he went further than that. He took it upon himself. He was not just a student, like many others want to make us believe that no, he was just a student at Teflo and making Totsawana school. Tiro was a revolutionary. Whether he was at university, whether he was a teacher, whether he was in Botswana, he continued pushing the bounds of our struggle and revolution. We see him standing up at Teflo, taking the cudgels and addressing. We see him coming back to the high school, becoming a teacher. There are many teachers. Some were in SASO, some were not in the organization, but there were many teachers, some were under, but they were afraid. But Tiro stood up. And he understood that it is young people you must reach out to. It is those 16-year-olds. It is those 17-year-olds. It is those 18-year-olds. Because in another 5 years, there'll be adults at 21, at 22. It won't take long. So that's where you start. You start them when they are 14 years, when they are 15 years, and you preach these things too. So Tiro did that at Maurice Isaacson. And when he left Maurice Isaacson, under the circumstances that were explained by Gaongalelwe here, he then went to Botswana. And a lot of us went to Botswana. But there are other people who, when they left to Botswana, they waited for somebody to come and lead them. Tiro did not wait for anybody to lead him. He made strides and he started pushing the bound in Botswana. In Southern Africa, when he became Southern African student movement and mobilized the other universities and worked with revolutionaries from Zimbabwe, from Botswana, from Lesotho, from Swaziland, and further afield. And worked with some of the comrades, like it has been mentioned, Boko Mafuna, Nogwekulu, and the others in Botswana, but then reached out also to know that in this struggle, we also need to mobilize and organize ourselves with the weapons of war. Earlier on, I mentioned his aunt, Mangwane. We call him Mangwane. We call her Mangwane. How he also involved his family and risked the family and the kind of risks they took. He brought in Mangwane into this thing, brought in his family into this thing, and spoke to the family to say, people are going to pass here, please help them. People are going to come to my home when they want to leave the country to go into exile. Please help those people. I don't know how he spoke to Mangwane, but Mangwane did that. When you mention Boko Mafuna, Mangwane knows who's Boko Mafuna. When you say Nongwe Heri Nongwe Kulu, Mangwane knows who's Heri Nongwe Kulu. When you say Charles Mtombeni, he's late, may his soul rest in peace. Mangwane knows who's Charles Mtombeni. Mangwane assisted a lot of comrades to cross the borders from South Africa into Botswana and back when they were coming back. Comrade Charles speaks about when they were in Botswana, they had to come back into the country for their underground activities. And they went The contact person was Mangwani. And Mangwani took them to another contact person. And she, in that area, were able to mobilize some of the people in the area to say these people are involved in the struggle. And Tiro said, we must help. And this is what we are doing. So you can imagine with this kind of work, what happens when such a person is killed in the manner in which he died. It means he was no ordinary person, and the system got to know that he was involved in these activities. This is my decision and conclusion. And they thought we must stop him right on his tracks. And they sent a personal bomb, and it killed. The Azanian People's Organization, Azapo, working with the family of Tiro in 1997, went to Botswana to go and dig up his remains, for those remains to be reburied in the country. Now, this is an organization that is not running the state. This is an organization that does not have the resources. But Azapo put things together and lived up to the wishes of Muliseng, the mother of Tiro, who says, if only he can come and be buried here where I am, so that when my time comes to leave this world, we should be buried side by side with my son. So in 1997, the leadership of Azapo went to Botswana, exhumed Tiro's remains, and reburied in the country. And I happen to know that there were people who were saying to the leadership of the ruling party in the province then to say, why can't we do something for Tiro? And they said, look, it is history. Forget about that man. We are now in another chapter. And they washed their hands and they left everything to the struggling family. So if there is anything to take as the Black Consciousness Movement, as Azapo, it's that which was able to remember Batubabona. When we were addressed by a former principal of Mtuli Gashesi and Zitulele Kindi, Taonyani, at the laying of the stone from Mtuli Gashesi, he said to that gathering that you Azapo people, you are amazing. You don't forget your people. Even if it takes you how many years, you don't forget your people. When we were commemorating and laying and unveiling a tombstone from Mtuli Gashesi, and we did it for Tiro, Petlamo Happy, many others. And not so long ago, we also went to Botswana to go and exhume Iso Mokgethi and brought them to be buried inside the country. So that is what one should remember about Tiro. But we are also not making a breakthrough in this village, home village. And I don't know why. We're not just making a breakthrough. When you go to Dinokana, people talk about Tiro in hush-hush tones. He's one of their own. They would rather go and get a statue of another person and put it there rather than to celebrate, to commemorate, and to recognize one of their own. I think it is something that we must continue to do it, to get young people in Dinokana especially, but all over the country, to say, "Le luna le na le moganka." Baganka ga ba tswe fela from the other provinces or ethnic groups. Le luna le le ko Botswana, le le Batswana, le le mo Dinokana, le na le baganka. So recognize baganka. And Tiro, it's one of those. He has sacrificed his life for the country when he was at university, his education. And he did not only look at doing it for Watuwago Dinokana, but for the country at large. So this is very important, and this is a message that we must continue to take to Dinokana, to the young people in Dinokana, but to young people at universities and other places, to say, this is the man. Now, I have spoken about Tiro then, when we were oppressed at University of the North. I have spoken, and other people have written and spoken about Tiro when he was at Morris Isaacson in 1973, when the Boers were trying to force Afrikaans into the heads of young people, and Tiro said, "Not in my lifetime." And got young people to work around that project and destroy it. That's why 76 comes out. We see Tiro now in Botswana in exile, where he says, "Now I'm placed here. This is the role that I should be playing." Now, those who are Seventh-day Adventists, they also talk about Tiro as a man of conscience, a man of God, a man in the church who used to take a pulpit, a platform, and preach in the church, and not and preach the right message of Christianity. He is that type of a person. Now, when we place him there and we see what type of character he is, and then move him to present day South Africa, 1994 upwards or onwards, I've got no doubt that some of the things that are happening now, Tiro would have been very sharp to oppose some of these things that are happening now. The sham, liberation, and democracy that we have, that is sold to us to say now we are free, but we only see this freedom on television and hear about it in the radios. But we don't see it where we live. It cannot be. If freedom has to be freedom, it must be freedom in our villages where we live. It must be freedom in our homes where we are. When there are no jobs, when the quality of education is so inferior, when people are starving where they live, when people have got no place to sleep, no place to stay, when the quality of their abode is of such low standard, it is my view that Tiro would not have tolerated the status quo. I think in the same way as he was able to mobilize, he would have assisted the organization and those who believe in the cause of justice and liberation to mobilize them towards making sure that things become better. When the leadership that we have are just leadership for themselves, I mean, that famous utterance of some minister saying, all of us have got something in the cupboards, skeletons in the cupboards. Of course, we say, speak for yourself. and your people. You are the ones who are doing these things. You are the ones who've got these skeletons. So speak for yourself and confess. Even when you thought, now this one is an eminent MEC, even when you said, now this one at least an upright MEC, and you discover that, no. Just to clean the schools, 431 million. Just to sanitize the schools, which are closed anyway, because there was no student going to school. So what more effort were you doing? Now, just for that, you think, no, this one is better than the other one, then it comes out. No, in fact, 431 million has actually been fought for this. When you thought, no, I've got a nice premier who's able to discipline his MECs, and then it comes out to say, no, this premier was actually telling the people, give these ones a job or take this tender to this one, appoint this, is involved. And you want to know, Hunty, who is not involved in this? And Tiro would have stood up to say, no, it can't be. When there is so much corruption in the country, everybody who goes to become or appointed to do a job, they just amass for the wealth for themselves in a corrupt fashion. I think Tiro would have stood up to challenge. And I think these are the lessons when we remember him that we should do that. And of course, we must not forget that as long as we continue to be disorganized in the way we are, people are also going to be doing things in our name. And they will take whatever it comes and put it in their pocket and forget about the cause of struggle and forget about helping our ordinary masses and our ordinary people. So, comrades, with those remarks, I want to invite you once more next year. I don't know in whatever fashion, because we used to go there physically. This year we couldn't go there physically to go and commemorate Tiro, but we have got those comrades of us who are in the Nukana, and we salute them for taking it on our behalf. And we say, let this day be remembered. And we want to say to the family of Tiro, let us continue to work together and not forget the stalwarts. There is Pat Thokoane, who is a direct cousin of Tiro, who grew up with Tiro, who always says, we've been asking this government to name the road that passes next to Tiro's house from the Botswana border of Lobatse to Zeras, Onkgopotse Tiro freeway. And they are dilly-dallying. They would rather wait for another corrupt leader so that they can name that road after a corrupt leader. Kepadisa, thank you very much for affording me the opportunity to share my little bit on Tiro, and to thank the other comrades who are here. And sometimes you don't see, you think you are talking alone, but thank you very much.
One nation. One Azania.
One nation, Comrade Kepadisa.
Thank you. Comrade President Arholeboge, I think this is probably one of the most exhilarating talks I've heard you give in a very long time, full of passion, but quite appropriate, lifting important episodes and moments in the life of this martyr, this leader of ours, but also linking political activities political highlights during the course of struggle to his direct influence and participation. Speaking for myself, now that you've lifted a story about how he was commemorated, when he died, some of us were hardly 10. I don't know what year it was, but there was a center spread in, I think it was Pace magazine, back in the days, probably in 1975, 76, with the headline, "There is no struggle without casualties." We didn't know who Tiro was. We didn't know, um, what was happening around him, but it was probably that Pace magazine when we were out there in the hinterland of Kimberley that exposed us to this iconic leader. Because just reading it as a young person then, when I was probably around 9 or 10 years, impressed on me that we are living in a country that is very brutal, a country where a person's life counts for nothing. Because when you read there that he was a student at Teflop, what he did, and then they pursued him all the way into exile, it touched my young mind, and I think it touched the minds of many other young people. And so it was that as we were growing up, in our deeper recesses, we wanted to make a contribution in the liberation of our people like Tiro did. And to us who were student activists, we always looked up to him as an icon, as a martyr. And in whatever we did in student activism, we wanted to parallel it along the lives of Tiro. And I hope that many of our young people, even our children, get to read about the life of Tiro and also aspire to emulate him and to do good for our country. Probably second to Steve Biko, Tiro is probably one of the most quotable leaders, not just in the Black consciousness movement, but in the liberation struggle in Africa, if not the whole world. He didn't write much. He only wrote that speech in during 1972 at the graduation ceremony. But so many writers have explored that speech and have broken it down. They have distilled it, and every line of that speech, every time you read it, you discover something new. So I just want to take this moment to lift one or two excerpts from what Gaongalelwe calls the seminal speech, and indeed it is seminal. Here is this one here. In the light of what has been said above, the challenge to every black graduate in this country lies in the fact that the guilt of all wrongful actions in South Africa, restriction without trial, repugnant legislation, expulsions from schools, rest on all those who do not actively dissociate themselves from and work for the eradication of the system breeding such evils. How appropriate, how timely, how reflective of our condition now. And that's why some of us say that that speech is so timeless. Every other excerpt that you lift out of it speaks to our condition now. We are facing a system that breeds evil, even as we live currently in South Africa. Something that Tiro remarked about almost 50 years ago. That system might not be breeding repugnant legislation anymore, but the system of evil that we are confronted with is the one that gives us poverty on a large scale, one that gives us unemployment on a large scale, one where millions and millions of our people are sinking deeper and deeper into the mire of poverty, squalor, and hopelessness. One would have thought that when Tiro wrote, he was projecting into 2021. But this is the situation that they were resisting, hopeful that if they were to change that system, things will become better and Black people's life will be lifted. But alas, hope is receding every day. And he is not, he also talks about the agency to stop this descent into deeper squalor and poverty. He says, it is us, Black graduates in particular, who must take responsibility for that. Because we have gone to school, we can analyze, we can research, but we seem to be helpless to change the fate of our people. So Tiro speaks to you and I who are tuned in here today, because we are the graduates. We are the ones who have studied further. Yet the situation is sliding further into oblivion. So we have a responsibility, comrades, those of us who have tuned in here, to dissociate ourselves from this system and to work for the eradication of this system that is breeding evil. So in our own walks of life, whether you are a political activist, whether you are a teacher, whether you are a scientist, let us have that conscience which Comrade Strike Thokoane says the Seventh Adventist remark about Tiro, that he was a leader of conscience. Let us ask ourselves the question, what is it that I can do in my little corner to make the lives of fellow South Africans better? I'm not built to speak here, but I was just lifting that quote. There are many other quotes that we can lift from Tiro. He remarks that we do not have a system of education common to all South Africans. This was in 1972. And 50 years later, we still do not have a system of education common to all South Africans. The system of education is distinguishable through the way in which it affords class privileges, racial privileges, perhaps also geographic, perhaps also demographic privileges to certain categories of people. Whereas when Tiro challenged our system of education, he was saying, let's fight for a system of education that is common to all South Africans. Why can't we have that in early childhood education? Why can't we have that in national education? Why can't we have that in higher education? But that is the challenge that Tiro throws up. He speaks to us from his grave, and he forces us today to reflect on the work that we must still do as Azapo, as the liberation movement, as Black people, and as citizens of this country. Thank you very much, Comrade Strike, for having given us that very inspiring and evocative speech covering the life of Tiro. Comrades, I want to, at this point, because we have some time, we had planned to finish the program at about 1 o'clock. I don't know if those who have tuned in, I know there are Tiro's contemporaries here, Comrade Secretary General Zitulele Qindi, Comrade Moemedi, Comrade Mangena. I'm going to just take liberties and say, let me give perhaps one or two comrades who want to share reflections about the life of Tiro, and who perhaps want to reorientate us to his ideals, to also have some brief comments, and then we will proceed to close. The comrades from Dinokana, I don't think they will manage to come through today. So let's just make peace with that. Is there anyone, comrades, who would like to comment, to make a remark? Have some reactions to perhaps the speech by the president, or have your own comments and reflections? If you can lift your hand, or if you can just unmute yourself and say something, that will be okay. Will you manage to unmute yourselves and proceed to comment? We are almost at the tail end of our.
Unfortunately, after Ritual in that consultative meeting, the country went into lockdown. I think it was a month later. So we were told that political gatherings are banned. Movement of the people nationally was restricted. We could not meet. We could only speak telephonically and through WhatsApp. And that was a spanner in the wheel. In the 6 months that we were given. Was it 6 months or 3 months?
Is that
6 months.
Hello, comrades?
6 months we
okay.
could not do anything.
Comrades, can you hear me there, Comrade Madalani?
When we came to level 1,
Comrade Sorry.
6 months.
Sorry to our participant. I just want to make sure that the comrade is talking to us or whether he's talking to a different group out there. Comrade Mtutuzelu, can you hear me?
Comrade Political Commissar, I can hear you very well.
All right. No, I just wanted to bring you in properly. All right. We have comrades here on Zoom. We wanted to bring you in from the Nokana. I see you are not on video. Can you go on video or you're struggling with the video there?
Comrade Kepadisa, we left the graveyard immediately after 12 o'clock. We have converged in town. Comrade Neo. We are continuing our meeting.
Oh, all right. Now, okay, that's what I wanted to make clear because I got a sense that you are not speaking to those audience, but you are the chairman here, Northwest. Can we give you a moment just to share with us what you did there today and maybe just give a message of support to the audience here because they had expected that the Northwest Comrade, we will be able to transmit from the Nokan. So let me just give
pitch yourself into frequency modulation. I cannot hear you. Pitch Katuza voice.
Hey, Angutla Tower. You must get closer to.
You are better now.
You must get closer to your phone. Yeah, Nekere go for 5 minutes just to address the audience here and give a message of solidarity and support. Unfortunately, we couldn't link up with you at that time.
Comrade.
All right.
We were able to meet at the gravesite.
Okay.
And we followed the program that you gave us to do.
All right, Tama.
Unfortunately, we had no a member from the Tiro family.
All right.
But we opened with a prayer. And as the chairperson, I gave a brief background of who Onkgopotse Tiro is.
All right.
What transpired. I think I started speaking of his famous speech in 1972 that led to his expulsion.
All right.
When he ran for his dearest life and ran to Gauteng. When he was employed at Morrison Isaacson High School as a teacher of history. And subsequently his departure to Botswana, where he met his untimely death through a letter bomb.
All right.
That is the background I gave.
Okay.
And we laid the wreath and we departed. Now we have gathered Kotropong. We are continuing with the second part of the day.
Okay.
We're looking into Azapo Northwest. We are trying to resuscitate or rejuvenate Azapo in the Northwest. We are trying to find our footing as a political party in Northwest, as Azapo.
Okay, no. Thank you very much, comrades. We really want to honor you and to express our gratitude to you that despite the challenges, COVID and social distancing and also the weather and many other factors, you managed to pull through the few comrades that you could pull through from. I know comrades traveled from Rustenburg and others from Potchefstroom to rededicate yourself to the memory and the ideals of Comrade Tiro. Ra lo leboga maithawas, and greet all the comrades who are gathered here. We will speak offline at the end of this.
But I remember who political commissar.
Ra leboga, ra leboga, ra leboga. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Mtutuzeli, the chairperson of Azapo in Northwest. Comrades, now I'll give to any one of the participants who would like to make a comment, maybe one or two, and then we will close the occasion. Is there anyone that wants to make a comment or say something? Rekogong, ke a go bona o sa le gone. Okay, if none, comrades, let us then express appreciation to all of you, particularly to those who took occasion to address us or share their insights and perspectives on the life of this martyr and freedom fighter. In particular, Comrade Gaongalelwe Tiro, who was actually not billed to speak, but who was kind enough to share with participants, some of the narratives or the ideas in the book that he has written about Tiro. I would urge most of us here to, purchase the book so that we know more about this leader of ours, because if we know more about him, we will feel the obligation to share more of his life and to perhaps be a little bit more like him as well. The president also spoke, and he gave a very inspiring address about Comrade Tiro. I see the Secretary General has raised his hand. Let me bring him in and then let him address us on this occasion. Comrade Zid, please come in.
Right. Dumela Ndati.
Dumela Mrena.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ndati. I don't mean to speak. I didn't mean to speak, especially after President Azapo Letsi. But then I'm coming in just to show appreciation and echo what you said. I think I also share your sentiment. That is one of the most moving addresses given us. So there are challenges speech writing. If you can get a recording and then we'll transcribe that speech and distribute it. That's my request. Rebecca, look into that and then transcribe the speech. Okay. Thank you, comrade. And quite a moving talk from the younger Tiro. And there's still much that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And again, to agree with you, how do I put it more politely and neatly? He's the most misappropriated speaker and writer, in the sense that a lot of his quotations are ascribed to certain people when they were made by him. I'm just doing that. But one that moved me, that always stays in our hearts, in my mind, is the one that says, there is no struggle without casualties.
Yeah.
It was prophetic, and he became one of the first casualties to die in such a brutal manner. All well, that ends well. Amanda Glondau.
Okay, no,
thank you, comrade.
Thank you very much, Comrade Secretary General. Comrades, this brings us to the end of the program. And as I had mentioned earlier, we also want to, Azapo will be commemorating Black History Month for the month of February. As we know, they've been doing that in the US for almost 30, 40 years. So we will also commemorate Black History Month. And part of the program is not just to commemorate history as history, but we will also deal with different thematic areas. The history of Black science, the history of economics, history in its various manifestations. We will invite speakers, we will invite people who are knowledgeable in the field, so that we can share this information, that it was not only the Albert Einsteins of this world or the Charles Darwins of this world who contributed to science. There were also other Black scientists who invented, who discovered things. It's just that, as we know, the world of epistemology also gives us what it wants to give us and suppresses what it deems inappropriate. And part of having these commemorations is also to bring in alternative informations, so that our children and young academics, young writers and researchers can be pointed in the right direction, particularly on Black history and African history. So at this point, Akile leboge, ke ne ke re hela pula, one Azania, one nation. Ra leboga.
I really got to fail. I think Barolong hela.
Re ne le rotlhe. Yeah, I get matsatsing a batho ba re ba rolong rotlhe ba gaetso. So a re a ne le ba rolong hela ra gore re ne le rotlhe. Thank you, Comrade Section. Have a good day, all of you.